the title of this panel was Practicing Privacy. I'm actually surprised by how few people use the word privacy. I was looking out for it because this is what I was going to talk about. And so it was actually not something that was like widely used among the speakers on the panel. But I wanted to think about how we've been discussing it, how we think about it, and sort of use that as an opening to some questions that the audience might have. So privacy has been seen as fundamental to the liberal conception of the individual, the division of the public and private realms, state and civil society, self and other. For this reason, many scholars working in the field of surveillance studies, among a variety of other fields, have been wary of the term, either critiquing it or avoiding it. In Surveillance Society, David Lyon, for example, has written, having successfully prized each of us from our neighbors so that we could be individuated social actors, amenable to classification and sorting and disembodied abstraction, privacy responses echo just such individuation, which is a fairly harsh critique of the concept of privacy. It's been called too narrow. In the New Politics of Surveillance and Visibility, Kevin Haggerty and Richard Erickson have pointed out that the idea of privacy obscures how often we willingly give away our personal information in exchange for certain benefits. And there's a variety of other critiques. But others, however, have indicated that privacy continues to be a useful framework, especially as it can be a rallying point for a wide range of people. I mean, we all sort of understand what privacy means and don't want our privacy to be violated, and this can appeal to a broader range of actors. In an example of how scholars can change their position over the course of a career, in a more recent work, David Lyon draws from a number of scholars reworking the concept of privacy to be more inclusive, more relational, and more focused on issues of social justice. Lyon writes that the kind of privacy that we need in the current moment is one that, quote, sees the common good as paramount and cares deeply about protecting the other person, not merely about my privacy. And I'm interested, I think this idea has come up in a number of the talks, definitely within the Cyper Collective, James Grimmelman, Matt Mitchell, everyone's talking about how privacy is about not just protecting yourself, but about protecting those around you. And so I wanted to ask the speakers on this panel more generally how all of you engage with the notion of privacy in your work, how you relate to it, how you deploy it, and how you might be in the process of redefining it.
Okay. Since I'm holding the mic, I'll go first on that. I try not to use the word privacy because we all know what privacy is, which is that which I shall not post publicly. But the definition of what that actually is very different in the communities that I'm in. So I have this opportunity to have this, like, everyone come together. These are our widgets, and we don't want people to take. And I throw that to the wind when I start saying, well, to me, privacy is like a naked picture, and to other people, privacy is like, no, that's totally fine, but I don't want my social security number, and then everyone starts fragmenting. Privacy is important, but privacy is so personal that I don't want you to define it.
I think in a lot of the contexts that I work with at FPF, privacy in this case is less specifically talking about a generic term so much as like specific trade practices of like source confidentiality and being able to, have a certain control over like how information gets released and published and verified along the way. So a lot of what I do has, I guess, less to do with privacy so much as just like the trade of journalism and how to, make sure that it happens the way we want to, which is less a question of at least a few definitions of privacy and more about a definition over like the sovereignty of a free press in some way. That's the way I kind of approach it.
And when I think about privacy, I think it's very relational, very contextual. And I think probably the first thing I ever wrote about privacy was an argument that you just look at Facebook as about privacy from Facebook and from the big actors behind it. Really going to miss the fact that people experience privacy issues with their friends and people sharing information they shouldn't have, the rituals of tagging and untagging, conflict over what gets said, and how do you change your relationship without sending updates to all of your friends? And then these day-to-day situated privacy challenges are as important to people as the larger ones.
I think that's a very important I almost want to like publicly apologize because I realized as soon as you started speaking, James's series of like incremental steps for preparing for the Trump administration, which are on james.crimelman.net, I believe, right, on the blog.
If you got the blog.
Yeah. Those had such a huge influence on me that I sort of said about things that I think you were going to say that were just already in my mind, like privacy as mindfulness and so on. But with that public apology, the thing with privacy is that I think like it's one of those like tricks of the English language that we tend to use it as an abstract noun as though it is like a thing, when I feel like it's much closer to like a gift, for example. You know, it's this contextual relational, it's a practice of sorts, and one that varies strongly from person to person, place to place, circumstance to circumstance. And with that in mind, I'd like to just put out two other ways of thinking about privacy. One as herd immunity, right? Like you don't just get vaccinated to keep yourself from getting sick. You get vaccinated to keep people more vulnerable than you from getting sick by giving something to them, right? Like it's something you do for the greater good. And I'm often approached by people like myself, which is to say like most boring people in the world, you know, like middle-aged, white, straight academics to me, you know, we're like, well, yeah, but what's the big deal with this? Like, I personally have nothing in particular, and you are the most important person because you set baselines against which other people can be measured and identified, against which people more vulnerable than you can be captured and excluded. That's why it's most important for walking jars and bands like me to like care a lot about this and see it as significant. And the other aspect of it, which is closely related, is a concept from the political writer James C. Scott, the anthropologist, who talks about this idea that he calls anarchist calisthenics. That rather than thinking about anarchism as like a giant project that you have to be involved with, to instead, like every couple days, maybe every day, identify a rule or a moment in which a rule is being enacted that's stupid, and calmly and rationally and carefully do not follow the rule. And this daily exercise keeps you limber for when you might need to not follow rules that would be much more stridently enforced, that are much more serious and much more dangerous. And by the same token, right, like privacy and security should be like stretching and brushing your teeth. You know, like they should be a kind of regular aspect of being a person in the contemporary world.
Okay, that was a lot. I guess the things that I would add is that for me, I definitely enact privacy measures in like great sprints where I'll suddenly realize, oh dear God, and then spend like 8 hours setting everything up so that I can then just kind of like keep it going. And also the privacy practices that I use definitely vary depending on the different groups of people that I'm talking to at the time. Some people do not worry too much, and I definitely try to push people, but I can't force everyone to install Signal. I can try, but I also will not stop speaking to them at the same time. And then I guess the final thing, just from where we're coming from a bit, is that there's also something we try to do because of us at the public library, but in activist groups, the idea of security culture as something that, and it's pretty hard to do because people don't generally want to do it. But having you mentioned some things about having like keeping certain speech to a minimum and things like that. So having the group of security be like a common contract that you're kind of always working on, and that I don't know if I finished it off, but that's all.
Okay, just checking that works. Thanks so much. This has been a really fantastic panel. I feel like I have 12 questions for each and every one of you, so we'll limit it to one. Coming off of this definition of privacy, moving more into how you bridge the gap to get people who don't think about their privacy thinking about it. Okay. Double check. Maybe someone else is listening. And I guess I want to more forefront the political aspects of this discussion because at the basis for it, we're bringing up Trump, we're bringing up other political projects, anarchist calisthenics, whether or not you're not really teaching the tools and you're not really teaching the security culture, but you're actually teaching a certain politics, or you're trying to move an ideology. And insofar as you can speak to that, what has been the most effective approach? How do you actually get people to take on the security culture? I've spoken to at-risk newsrooms who have had computers stolen, have had spear phishing attacks. They don't change their culture. So how do you get the broader public concerned? How do you get that base denominator concerned with that political project, and then move that?
Sure. I guess, unfortunately, I think that it does seem like failure is one of the first and greatest motivators for getting people to change their privacy practices. Whether that continues is definitely uncertain. I mean, I know that at J20 there were huge security problems with the people coming and not being aware of the risks of actually attending and participating in certain actions. And unfortunately, that's something that they only realized afterwards. And I don't know how you foresee those things. But yeah, that's my first response.
Buckminster Fuller used to say that a lot of major social innovations happen through a process called emergence through emergency. And I think if there's a positive side to this, is that often these shifts seem to happen when things have gone terribly wrong. And being able to incubate good practices and tools and keep all of those things lit and going, and again, maybe kind of a calisthenics metaphor, but being able to kind of keep all of those things alive such that when the time comes, the web page is up, Secure the News is ready to roll for people to actually figure out what they need to do when something bad happens.
Sometimes the forces of capitalism just don't do this. The convergence of threats, the idea that many different people who would like to cause you harm could do so by stealing your email password or by getting access to your phone, means that some large technology companies have good motivated reasons for trying to create devices that are not just secure, but are also usable. Because if it's too secure, it can be usable. If it's too unusable for you, you won't use it, you won't buy the device, you won't buy the things people are advertising on it, and their proposition doesn't work. Which means, for their own reasons, they can create technology that is usable and that actually does improve on security. And sometimes there are organizations that subsist on donations or volunteer effort that build things. But I think the most important thing is finding the usable tech and convincing people, hey, switch to this and your life will be better because it is both more private and secure and also more useful. You will not feel that this is an imposition. It will just be a part of your daily practice that is comfortable.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to the theme of emergency, a common kind of theme that we see with newsrooms that we work with is they came to us kind of after, not always, but after they've been hacked in some way. And I almost want to create a challenge point of everybody that was hacked by the Syrian Electronic Army in 2011, where that was just kind of a thing that happens. All these newsrooms got phished, and now they're oh, we should think about security. It's an unfortunate trend. Even just within my circle of friends, I'd be the one person in the room, be hey, you should all use a password manager and just do it big. And they'll RSVP yes on Facebook for during a crypto party and not go. And then oh, our friend so and so, had her Gmail account and Instagram account taken over by some random dude. And then all of a sudden, it's the day afterwards, everybody's all right, we're signing up to a change your passwords, doing full encryption. Yeah, it's one of those. I don't know. I mean, unfortunately, I haven't figured out a way to get people to. We've done trainings and stuff in the past where you kind of made it interesting, made it seem here's a way to improve, something about the thing that you're trying to master. But unless it's something that they're already setting out to master, then
I'm just gonna say the same thing, basically. You know, if you know anyone who like checks the smoke detectors, make sure the battery isn't working, and they know where their fire extinguisher is, that's someone who's survived a fire. You know someone who has latches on their door and like knocks, and who's, that's someone who like came home and all their stuff was taken and was a home invasion or that, right? We are human beings, and that's how, that's naturally what we do. We know this is a bad thing. We put it away and bury it. And we know we should be doing something, but we don't do it. The most important thing is that you know what a smoke detector is. You know what an extinguisher is. You don't have a lock, but you know what the lock looks like, and you know there's a hardware store when you get it. And that's what we're doing. We just lay down that groundwork. So like, look, when the time comes, you know what this is. You know where to go to that crypto party. You know what websites to look at. I do not expect a person to just say, hey, yeah, I'm totally going to do this stuff. Because if you do something quickly, you're going to forget it quickly. It's you have to like take it slow and just kind of warm up and master. I'm lucky that I work with communities where they're under threat. So it was pre-Trump. They were living in that danger zone, panic zone. So they were like, okay, I'm here, I'm going to this thing, tell me what to do. So, but when it comes to how do I teach people, to care about their privacy, start with the reason why you even want them to do this, because you love them and you care about them, and then walk them towards that.
Thank you all so much for this really great series of presentations. So all of you touched on kind of parts of this. I was just curious, how do you think technology and our ways of engaging with technology has changed our experiences and our daily practices of friendship? And because there is such a thing as a Facebook friend, but I would argue that the Facebook friend in its ideal form is more actually akin to a spy than like the best spy will know everything about you, will follow all of whatever it is that you're posting, and will also make and blend in and kind of corroborate in that kind of relationship. I was just thinking because in your presentation made me think of like Ocean's 11 and how Brad Pitt and George Clooney, like they have this like really interesting friendship because they're spies and criminals, and they're constantly training people on how to be spies. But between the two of them, they have this like weird like psychic connection, and they finish their sentences, and their friendship is best expressed when they have irresolvable conflicts. And so I'm curious how specifically Facebook and social media kind of makes the irresolvable conflict impossible by putting it in this kind of public space and in this way taking away from the precious analogicity of relationships.
I guess to respond to that, I would say that I think that already people exhibit like a more remarkable degree of like self-fashioning intention when they're constructing your profiles. Like, I think there are slips and people forget stuff, but I mean, I don't think I know anyone who just like is their Facebook profile. And maybe some people are better or worse at that simulation, but I think that's true. And I guess the one thing I'd add to that is that there's something about the way that everyone has access to these different forms of communication networks. And part of what, so Facebook is one, and talking to people versus another, and part of security, practicing security is making different networks closed off, which tends to have, so we're coming from like volunteering and activist space, tends to have the effect of like actually closing the community off, making it less accessible to people who might have good intentions. But at the same time, it's something that is necessary. And it's sometimes very hard to know where that line is. When have you actually excluded people through your desire to be safe? The only plus
And it's such a, I don't quite know what to add to it. But I would just, no, I think it's a really, I think like just to, because I think that's quite a wonderful question. So just to add one additional problem to it, right? Which is that I will personally admit I have an aesthetic and a personal fondness for like destroying identity, you know, for anonymity and opacity and disappearance. Many of my my best friends, because of the research I do, are people who are more or less criminals in some sense. We're being live streamed right now, so that's all we'll say about that. And we have very particular ways of being together and ways of spending time together. And I've come to admire the willingness to recognize how much of what passes for one's sense of self in the world is actually ridiculous performance that can be thrown away. But this is also something where it's really, really important as we talk about privacy and security to understand that part of why we need to defend these things, part of why we need to defend them, especially in terms of things like the rule of law and properly run social networks and so on, is because we need spaces in which people can publicly be themselves, right? In which they can express solidarity, in which they can have that effect where you encounter someone who's like the way you secretly are and realize that you're not alone in the world, right? Like, my name is Harvey Milk, I want to recruit you. You know, like that was such an important moment, and that's the kind of space that needs to continue to exist. So just to add another layer of conflict to that, right? Like, I love the idea of torching everything and walking away and living by shoplifting from convenience stores. But there's high social costs that get paid through that process, and not just for the individual who does it.
I think the social media technologies go through life cycles, and there's always this appeal of ones that seem broader, less public, that offer some kind more authentic self-experience on them. And you say we see Whisper, or you see Hello, or whatever the flavor, Chapel whatever the flavor of the month is. And to some extent, these things don't stay stationary in the ecosystem. They either fall away, or the fact that they work so well causes them to evolve into the stodgier stat forms, and then they get bought by Facebook. And then they become just as boring as Facebook. And you tend to look at the ecosystem as a whole and not just running one platform with others, because at any given time you have places that are more professional instead, from Facebook on through LinkedIn, and then you have these other things that are other spaces where people have, if not less performed selves, then differently performed ones that are freer and looser. And the most important thing is preserving both kinds of spaces for everyone.
Yeah, I keep wanting to think that there's like a happy medium between the total, panopticon on Facebook and like the total just like ragged raccoon, like in a dumpster fire, like 4chan situation. And I keep harkening back to like the early web before either of those websites existed. And what it's like, I'm older than I look, so I remember like the old, I just caught the tail end of like Usenet or Honest Decline, and also the rise of like web forums. So as one would probably, I think like the somethingawful.com forums, if anybody remembers those, like they were like, it's what it says on the tin. It's like, it's pretty bad sometimes, but like they had a system of like having in mind like small communities and moderation and things that were done by algorithms now being done by human beings with like kind of measures in place and like a wall of people that have been banned and the reason why, and like this kind of like more human approach to like kind of keeping the community like welcoming enough to not turn into 4chan, but also letting people have a pseudonymous identity that is in no way tied to their like real identity. I'd like to see that come back, and I guess somethingawful.com still exists, but I haven't looked at it in a while.
I'll just say, like, I kind of agree with David. Like, I believe that you can still have some kind of friendship, bring back to your actual point. You can still have some kind of friendship and do electronic means. Like, everything things like the well, you know, and it was like, okay, we're all cyberpunks, and you'll write this long correspondence letters to a stranger, they'll write you back, and you know, it was like, oh, that was the first online kind of community. What we have now is Facebook is kind of like a friendship simulation. You know, in friendship, the big cost of it is it's not on your own time. You know, you can't just, but in Facebook, I can say, I want the friend feelings now for an hour and 20 minutes. But the sad thing about it is, part of the joy of seeing your friend is echoed back on their face. So you're just like, oh, look, they're doing that thing, but they don't see you. They don't see your joy. And it's just empty. It just is wasted into the ether. So it's kind of like, you know, my friend had this dog, and, you know, she loves her dog. He would cry at night, cry. She'd put a clockwork clock and just wound it up, and that ticking sound, the dog thought was long, you know? And that's what Facebook is, that ticking sound that drives us there. We're warm human animals, you know, we want that. That ticking sound is not long. That's not your real friend. They can't see you, they can't see you crying, you know? And I think that's what Facebook is, kind of an online community that took the wrong turn.
Yeah, I think maybe we could continue over one. Thank you so much.